to start this off at 11 Eastern. So we'll continue to let folks trickle in here, and I'll make some introductions as we get started. All right, my clock is showing 11 a.m. Eastern, so we'll get a start. You should be able to see this at the top of the screen, but this session is being recorded. If you do not consent to being recorded, please do drop off this Teams call. There's opportunities to ask questions through nup@inl.gov if you don't feel comfortable with the recording today. With that, I want to welcome everyone and thank all of you for being here to what we're terming the office hours for the FY 2023 CINR FOA funding call. These sessions are really an opportunity for the university community to engage with program management at DOE. And so that's the intention of today's meeting. There's really three objectives we're trying to meet. The first is Dave Henderson is here, program manager for the NEAMS program, and is here to answer your questions in regard to trying to better understand ongoing programmatic activities and what's going on in the programs if you're unfamiliar with what the direct funded DOE activities are, to receive clarifications about what may or may not fit in any mission or in a specific subtopic area. And finally, this is really an opportunity that we've opened up for all of you to talk with and understand the programs a little bit better. So from that perspective, we're just trying to build better communication channels. To that extent, we'd like to ask all of you to limit your questions to those objectives. And I'd like to remind everybody that as we've opened the scopes up this year to be much more broad than they traditionally are, much more focused on any mission and less focused on program priorities. There's a major change here. And so what we're hoping to do is to educate you all a little bit about the programs and allow you to understand what may or may not fit within any mission space, or if there's other agencies, for example, that do certain work, that we would clarify those things for you. I will remind everyone that there is an other topic area category. Once we have this conversation today, and as Dave explains a little bit about the two subtopic areas, if you feel like you have an innovative idea, something that may not be mainstream in the way that things are explained in these subtopic areas, we have created those other categories to capture innovative, groundbreaking style ideas that us as DOE have not necessarily considered. So it's a catch-all, but that will include all modeling and simulation topics for this specific scope area, this specific topic area. As we take questions, I will ask everyone to use the raise hand function in Teams. If you're not familiar with Teams, that is in the reactions tab or the reaction buttons that sits at the top of your screen. You just click on that and then click on the little raise hand icon to raise your hand. I'll call on you in order of how your hands are raised. And would just like to remind everybody we have a 1-hour session here today. So please do be cognizant of that and respectful. We'd like you to have a back and forth, ask follow-up questions, those types of things. But we also want to make sure that we reserve time so that everybody that would like to ask a question has the ability to do so. So from that perspective, I'll introduce our topic area, which is modeling and simulation. Dave Henderson is the point of contact for all of these areas, so that makes it a little bit easier. And those are the subtopic areas are M&S1, multi-scale modeling, M&S2, verification and validation, uncertainty quantification, and then, like I said, our other modeling and simulation topic area, which is M&S3. So, Dave, wanted to give you a quick opportunity to make any introduction you would like, and then we can open up for questions.
Okay, and I'll be very brief because I think most folks will have watched the webinar. I guess the one thing I would say is, as Drew was just outlining, and hopefully it came across pretty clearly in the webinar, the scopes for modeling and simulation in particular are very, very broad. We didn't put constraints on any of them related to, you know, what would be helpful to the program. So they're wide open. So I know I got a lot of questions in the webinar and afterwards about those sorts of things. What would be interesting to the program? And so in this whole discussion as well, my comments about where the program's going or what's of interest to the program should not be construed as meaning that's what this call is seeking. So kind of just reiterating what Drew just said in other words. I will put up an organizational chart of the NEAMS program in just a minute. I'll just share that as a screen share, assuming I'm able to do that. I might leave that up as it just will kind of give some additional points of contact within the NEAMS program at the national laboratories. A couple of the folks are national lab joint faculty appointments, so they're also a university, staff. I have sent out a note to all of those folks that if anybody is asking about where the program is going, you know, they should be willing and able to speak to more details on any of the technical area aspects of the program. So it's not from a standpoint of, again, something that's valid or invalid or sought under this call, but rather what is the program doing in more technical detail that might be of interest to you. So just kind of with that preface, I want to open it up for questions.
All right, thanks, Dave. We will go ahead and take questions using the raise hand function. So please raise your hand. I'll call on you and we'll open up discussion. Sebash Sharma, you've raised your hand first. Go ahead. It seems like you're still muted.
Oh, thank you for reminding that. Yeah, now I can speak. Yeah, so this work scope of modeling and simulation, does it also allow the experiment part also in the work scope? I mean, can we have experiment plus modeling plus simulation all together in a proposal?
Yeah, I think I appreciate the question. I think it's pretty open. The way I described it in the webinar was if the emphasis of what you're proposing is modeling and simulation, you know, a new model development or, you know, addition to an existing tool or even a new tool, and you want to include some amount of experimentation as part of that, I think that's completely appropriate. If the focus of the work is really the, you know, experimental data for use somewhere else or by someone else, then I think that probably belongs in one of the other topical areas, you know, the reactor or fuels topical areas. But again, if the focus is modeling and simulation and experimentations needed for validation or anything like that, I think that's valid under these scopes.
Oh, perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other follow-up questions before we move on? All right, let's go to.
I have one more quick question.
Oh,
sorry.
Yeah, go. Yep, go ahead. Go ahead. Please do.
I mean, I heard. I mean, last in the webinar, I have read that. I mean, you appreciate. I mean, it doesn't have to be NEAMS tools, right? I mean, if you can use commercial CFD tool to basically develop model that's really appreciated, right?
Yeah, the short answer is you're correct. there's no requirement to use the NEAMS tools. And it would be helpful for us in the program if you outline, exactly what form or format or code or whatever else, the model that you develop, how it would end up in the end. So we have an idea of, how we could pick that up and use it within the program. That would be great. It's always good to be precise about the output of your work. But no, using NEAMS tools or even DOE tools is not required.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Right. That does bring up a good point that we pointed out in a lot of these office hours, is that with this shift into a much broader scope area, and essentially, DOE asking all of you to bring your best ideas, it does require that you make some strong justifications about the approach and about how you're doing things. The programs aren't necessarily defining those aspects, but I think all the programs would be interested in understanding strong justifications for, if it's not integrated with the program direction, where the benefit would be. So with that, let's go to our next individual, Ioannis Masterakos. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. This is, I have a very specific question, and I apologize if you have already answered that in the webinar. I did not have the chance to watch it. But we have a person, a collaborator from Naval Research Lab that we would like to include in the proposal. So can a person from this lab participate, and how this will be reflected in the budget?
Drew, that may be a better question for your side on how that should be reflected. This is the U.S. entity, right? The Naval Research Lab, or is this the U.K. one? I get their names mixed up.
No, it's a U.S. entity.
Yeah. So there is the ability for that's a question that may be best evaluated by email. If you wouldn't mind sending it to me, that way we can get a full evaluation of the specific institution. There's a lot of different designations for those types of laboratories, so I don't want to misspeak in that space. But if you send it by email, then we can get you a specific response on that specific institution and what their designation is, whether that's FFRDC or a GOGO or actual federal type situation. So if you wouldn't mind sending that forward to NEUP@inl.gov, we can work with the contracting folks here to do some research and make a determination.
Yeah, I will do that. Thank you.
All right,
but
thank you.
In general, they should be a legitimate collaborator. It's more a question of how they get captured in your application, right? Is that right, Drew?
Right. So yeah, I think that's the point is, that it wouldn't be to deter you from collaborating with the best team makeup that you can put together, right? So it's a question of how that may work from a potential available funding standpoint, right? I think that's the key part of the question, and I'm sure that we could evaluate that and understand what kind of designation they have and whether that fits within the FOA or not before, for example, you process a pre-application with a specific team. So,
yes, that's correct. Thank you.
All right. We'll continue taking questions here. We do have until noon Eastern. If we do have a lull in questions, we'll break before then, but we'll continue taking questions until everybody's finished from that standpoint. So, Sebastian, you have raised your hand again. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have one general question. So if we have to reach out to federal point of contact for different work scope, can we get their email ID, or we have to just email at one single email ID, nup at INL? Is
So
that one?
we'd prefer that you send the email through NEP@inl.gov. We do route those to the appropriate program managers. There are some federal procurement rules on those responses. For example, we're recording this today because answers to these funding opportunity questions need to be posted publicly. So there are some situations where instead of a direct interaction with the federal program manager, we can help you along, for example, of making sure that you understand the rules before we give you an answer on how it's going to be posted publicly, and revising questions if there's details that may be inappropriate to post publicly, for example. So we prefer for you to work through NEP@INL.gov to be able to go through that process before we get you an answer from program management.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Yep. While we are waiting for additional questions, I do want to mention Anna will post resources here in the chat for everyone, but there are resources both from all of these meetings if you weren't able to visit some of these other office hour meetings but have interest in what questions were asked. There are postings of those questions, postings of the webinar presentations, both PowerPoints and videos, our question and answer sessions that have happened through the webinar and through this week's activities, as well as general questions and answers for how the process works, the application and review process. So Anna has posted those up, and as we've talked about, NEUP@INL.gov is a one-stop shop for additional questions. So let's continue on with some questions here. Majdi, you have your hand raised next. Go ahead.
Thanks, Drew. Hi, Dave. I got actually one question that has been answered by you from Sebash. So I will just move to the second question about MNS3, or probably in more general, all these others categories. So is there budget dedicated to the work scopes under others like MNS3, or is it like, if no good proposal came in MSN1 and 2, we will look at MNS3. So I would like just to know if I got an idea that probably fits well in MNS3 more than MNS2, does it make my chances less if I apply it to MNS3 than MNS2 and vice versa? Thank you.
Yeah, and I can comment on this, Dave. So from that perspective, anytime a scope area is published in one of these funding opportunities, there is estimated budget associated with that, right? So I do want to be clear that we don't have an FY 2023 budget, so there's no accurate determination about how many potential projects in any specific area are going to be funded. But I do want to emphasize that the other area is not seen as lesser or different than any of these other areas, right? It will be evaluated just like any of these other scope areas. And we anticipate that as long as the quality of applications is good, that we'll be making selections out of each of the topic areas. So that I use the words anticipated and estimated because of the fact that we don't understand budgets yet. But I want to be clear about intentions, that any scope area that's published as part of the funding opportunity, we intend to support. So from a stand, as long as there's budget and quality of applications available. So
one more question I have, can I ask at this point of time? Majid, did you finish?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Drew. Thanks, Dave. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Okay.
One more question. I mean, follow up of what question Majid asked. I remember, I think during the webinar, I think Drew had said that if I have a two idea for models under one work scope, I can put two proposals, right, as under the same work scope. Is that okay? Is that allowed? I mean, just wanted to confirm again. I think Drew had said that it's allowed.
That's right. So the restriction is no more than, you can have your name on no more than 6 applications, and you can have your name on no more than 3 as the lead PI. So think 3 lead PI, and then if you're going to be a co-PI collaborator, that type of your name shouldn't be on more than 6 applications. There's 2 things to consider within those 6 applications. The first is, if you are planning to submit more than 1 application, you should not submit the same application to do 2 different scope areas. Each application you should choose the best scope area that you feel it would be appropriate to submit that application to and submit it there. We have an internal process here. If we feel like it doesn't fit in that category as well, there's an opportunity here where we have program managers point those things out, and with permission from a lead PI can make a recommendation to shift that to a different work scope area. So that's the major restriction is, you know, one distinct idea should have 1 application, right? So from that standpoint, if you have 2 very different applications that fall within the same scope area or the subtopical area, you can submit both of them there as a lead PI, or even in a co-PI status on a second application in the same area. All of those things are permitted as long as you abide by the first 2 restrictions that I said, no more than 6, and you're not submitting the same application twice.
Thank you, Drew. You said that if the program manager or reviewer decides that 2 proposal with the same PI, if one proposal is suited for the other work scope, they can move to other work scope with PI's permission, or they will just recommend it to be moved to other. How it's gonna be? So they can recommend, right?
Yeah. So those are relatively rare circumstances, but yeah, we would never move an application without the PI's permission to do so, right? So if there's for example, I'll use an example based on one of the questions that Dave just answered. This question about experimental versus modeling work in these modeling and simulation categories. If for example, someone in this modeling and simulation area had something that was very experimental heavy, and it was like, well, that would likely fit better in the fuels category, it would likely fit better in the reactor category or something. That's a conversation that's had here internally, is raised to our attention, and then a conversation ensues, right? And if it's seen as beneficial to the application to move areas, then we would communicate that back to the PI and get permission from the PI to move it to a different category.
That answers my question. Thank you very much, Drew.
Yep. All right. Well, Majdi, do you have any additional questions? You still have your hand up. Just want to make sure we. Okay. Hand went down.
I forget.
Yeah. No problem. All right. We'll continue taking questions here. I don't have any hands raised right now. We'll pause here for a couple minutes, but if we don't have any additional questions, then we'll wrap up here after an extended awkward silence. So sorry, Dave. I'll stay here on the video here with you so we can share the moment together. So. Weiji, go ahead.
All right, thank you. I have kind of few questions, and there maybe one is 2 common questions and 1 specific questions. And 2 common questions is, the first one is about the MS1, MS2. Their scope description is very broad, and there, for example, MS1, the multi-skill, saying, transport phenomena, material, fuel, and their fluid behavior, at all, multi-length scale. And so the MS2, V and V and certain quantification. So the first question is do you expect the proposal to cover all aspects or most of the aspects, all just, kind of narrow to a specific physics or specific direction? For example, multi-skill, maybe just the fuel and the fluid, or just the fluid, And MS2, V and V may be together, and the UQ is a separate, independent. And that's the question 1. And question 2 is also general. Is I record that in the webinar, someone mentioned that it's all the scope is up to 3 years and $1 million. And is it possible that if the scope, proposal, they want to more focus on one thing that can make the budget is lower, maybe the half of the million or just a 600K, and just it's still maybe 3 years there. So would this be preferred, or would be from program perspective, we still want to keep just maybe just a big proposal, 1 million there, and all don't want to kind of go down the scope and the budget. And the third question is a more specific question, MS2, and from the draft to the official release, I noticed there's one sentence just inserted is about the neural network kind of statement. And it seems to me is it may it's not very relevant to their original kind of a scope description, original draft scope description. Could you clarify why that is inserted here for what purpose? Yeah, those are the questions. Sorry, I'll just make many.
And Dave, maybe I can make a comment on the second question, knock that one out, and you can take the other two. So from a up to 3 years, up to 1 million, the up to language is intentional, right? So from that perspective, what we would like applicants to do is make a determination based on the scope of the project that you propose to target the number of years and the budget in a realistic way, right? So from that perspective, I think whether it's a 600K project, $1 million project, it's really going to depend on what the scope is, and having a more focused, more limited scope that may be lower dollar amount would not be seen as negative by any means, right? So because the intention there is is the budget going to be appropriate for the scope that's proposed? So so from that perspective, those are up to, so you can make adjustments whether that's less years or less budget based on a specific focus area that you want you want to focus on. So that's encouraged in making sure that you can do the research in the budget. We just like the scopes are increasing in flexibility, the budget has increased in flexibility in that same way to support a variety of different types of scopes that all of you will propose. So go ahead, Dave, with the other questions.
Okay. And I guess, one thing I would add is, in the past, this is still on that second question about proposing something for less duration or less funding. Even in the past, they were all worded as up to, and but the funding was coming out of the programs, and we looked, we developed very specific scopes, and we would say, that really should only be about a 2-year scope, and so we would put the duration in for 2 years. But like Drew said, we haven't set those kinds of specific timeframes for each of the different scopes. But thinking about it from modeling and simulation space, if what you're proposing should really be a short duration, it's highly impactful, which is why you're proposing it in the first place, but it'll only take you 2 years, and getting it done, that soon will be able to, let's say, impact industry deployment or something like that. Those are the kinds of things you would lay out. So, Drew noted that it would not be looked at as a negative for it to be shorter duration or less funding. I would say by the same token, it in and of itself, it probably wouldn't be looked at as a positive either. It's more about what he noted several times, that the scope of work and the funding and the time frame tie together and make sense. I think in any application you submit, those are things you want to hit on. So moving to the first question about these different scopes and how much needs to be included in them. To some degree, I have to go back to that original statement that, you know, the scopes say what the scopes say. We tried to put extremely few constraints. I think the only real statement we said in either of those MS1 or MS2 is really that last sentence that says, you know, what the proposal should demonstrate. And my big thing is demonstrating that you're aware of work that the DOE program or programs have been doing for sure, but what else is going on out there in industry or academia elsewhere? I mean, just as a researcher, you guys are typically aware of that. Sometimes we get proposals that really seem like they may not be aware of major things. So that's the big thing, is just spelling out that you know what the landscape is, and this is why what you're after scratches an itch, so to speak. There's these two scope titles were put in give kind of some background on just how the formulation of the scopes this year worked. They were kind of like an annotated outline, right? We identified some key aspects or key top level topics that would be that are major parts of the program, or areas that we knew were ripe for research, right? And these are very vague or high-level topics, multi-scale modeling, or V&V and UQ, right? Those we kind of put out there as titles before we even had the scopes together. The reason for the multi-scale is that, you know, that's where things are going. I also wanted to differentiate between just multi-physics very broadly, particularly to discourage a little bit, quite frankly, like I said in the webinar, about, I was afraid if it said multi-physics modeling, that folks would be trying to come up with a lot of you know, new multi-physics platforms. And as I said in the webinar, there's just a host of those out there already. So I'm hoping folks will focus on multi-scale modeling, and particularly how do you translate across the scales? You know, how do we draw insight from lower length scale kinds of phenomena and translate that up to where it's actually something useful to a designer, to a regulator, you know, whoever, giving insight on the engineering scale behavior. So just kind of some background on where that title came from. That's where it came from, was to try to get us focused on technical multi-scale work and techniques, as opposed to genning up the next new multi-physics framework. The second topic, MNS2, it was really just kind of recognizing that in addition to the how should I put that, the you know, physical phenomena modeling and that kind of technical work that's more MNS1. MNS2, it was to recognize that, you know, there are some really interesting V&V and UQ kinds of things out there, research in those areas, whether it's from other fields or AI and machine learning kinds of techniques, but where things could really be sped up and made more effective, more efficient there. I'm gonna hit on your third question as well while talking to that. So that piece on the neural networks that we added to MNS2, where that came from is the fact that we're seeing a lot of AI and machine learning specifically out there, proposals in SBIR and Office of Science and the NEOPs over the years and things like that. Seeing a ton of those, and it starts to seem like that's a magic wand, that I just do this thing and the AI or the machine learning or the neural network specifically is going to give us this result. As we were talking within the program, we see significant opportunity in use of those tools, but in applications we see much less recognition of the limitations or the dangers of using those tools without appropriate bounds. Or so basically the question is, how do you know if you've gone beyond the training space or the validity of the neural network that you've set up or the machine learning algorithm that you've set up? How do you know when you've gone beyond the bounds, the valid bounds of that? This would be particularly important in a regulatory space, right? If we're going to make use of these tools, and this goes for other areas as well, other technical areas, but when we're putting these tools together, how do we know when we've gone beyond the limits of our ability to accurately extrapolate? And so that's where that came from. As we were seeing where VMV and UQ kinds of proposals have been going, we wanted to highlight that as something, I think, across the board that would be really interesting to us. Are some techniques for flagging that to a user. So that's where that came from. That's why it got inserted. We were kind of progressively trying to build these scopes, and as we were looking at that, re-looking at it actually for the second or third time, we said this is something we want to highlight. Now, having said that, all of these things are ideas. They're not required. This gets back to your original question. For MNS2, you don't have to include that as part of your application. We just wanted to highlight it as something interesting. Really, all of these scopes are almost anything goes. Just try to pick the best header and propose work that really kind of moves things forward in that technical area. That was a long explanation. I think I'll stop there and let you kind of react and tell me what didn't I hit.
It makes all sense. Yeah, thanks Drew, and thank David. And certainly I can follow up that about the MS2. That's, for example, it also include MS1. I understand the NIMS, try to focus on adding capabilities to the current NIMS 2 case and make it more powerful. And certain these wording in their scope, try to also focus on that point. But anyway, is all those tools will be applied. You mentioned that give it to the industry to use them, but in these kind of descriptions, there's no mention of just what specific nuclear designs or systems we want to target for. Is we can understand it could be very general. It's it's certainly from truth perspective, make the general is sometimes really reality can never be general. And so do you want the proposers to kind of to identify, this reactor system, that reactor system, they have some strong needs and something, about the NIMS tools not really ready for something and there's some gap, you need to go for it. So you just leave the space for the proposers, right? Or you have a preference of which, advanced reactor systems, we should consider.
Yeah. So did you want to say something first, Drew?
You can go ahead, Dave. I'll follow up.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, again, this gets back to these. Wait, I heard somebody. Okay, I'll try again. This gets back to these scopes being intentionally wide open. Both, well, for two reasons. One being that that we want to leave it to the proposer to describe the issue that they're seeing, the gap that they're seeing, and propose novel solutions to meet them. There's actually a second reason for us not specifying in this scope, and that is that we're doing research, we're developing models and tools for the entire landscape of reactor types. So there's something to be done on each of them. They're not closed off in any way. We have, I won't go into too much depth, but each of these reactor types, the designs are at different levels of maturity. You have light water reactors, obviously commercial, lots of tools out there. Like there's only a handful of gaps there that really anybody wants tools for. There's interesting research to do, but fuels is one in particular. Thermal hydraulics is another, although it could be a black hole, right? If you could get really good modeling on what does boiling, how do you model boiling in a light water reactor, that'd be great. But you could spend 2 decades and a ton of money trying to get there. So you just need to be real specific in applications about how are you going to solve this problem. You've got fast reactors that have an entire host of knowledge base and also tools, right? There's much less there than some other reactor types like a molten salt reactor where we don't even have basic physical and thermochemical properties. So it'd be really tough to lay all of that out. So the bottom line is there's interesting stuff to be done in each of those. If you want some more specific information on the NIMS assessment of where we are in a technical area on one of those systems, I could point you to an appropriate lab person just to kind of tell you here's what we see or what we're focusing on within the program. But again, that doesn't limit you as far as what you want to propose. If you feel that these NIMS guys, they don't realize that this is really the next big issue, lay it out in an application, and yeah, we're open to that kind of stuff for sure.
And Dave, I'll just add to that. Part of the intention of these sessions and information that was given in the webinar is to try to provide as many resources as possible about what program activities are, right? So if there's a desire to try to synergize or try to put here, I'm hearing myself here. Let me scoot back a little bit. Okay. So if you're trying to synergize with the programs, that's encouraged, of course. But it's one of the important things from a university program perspective that we're focused on with these broader scopes is feedback that we've received consistently, which is there's other ideas out there, there's other approaches that aren't written in the more detailed scopes that we would like the ability to make the case for, right, through proposals. And so we're trying to bridge the gap between those, those two different objectives. I think Dave or any other program manager would love to see, some types of integration with the program when appropriate, but also understands, there's these ideas that are outside of, that space that are also very valid, technically sound, and great projects. So we're trying to afford that flexibility to do, to either try to find connections within the program or to do something that's outside of that space.
And I'll add one more thing because you made me think of it, Drew, and that is that we will absolutely involve folks within the program. No matter what the scope is, there are work that's being done under the NEOPS. We will make use of, even if you're proposing something we've not done work on. If it's going to provide something that we can make use of, we're going to make use of it. So.
Thank you. All right, thank you. We'll continue taking questions here for the next 15 minutes or so. So if anybody has additional questions, please raise your hand, and we'll hang on until we run out of questions. Shu Wu, go ahead. You are muted.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Yeah, sorry, I missed the first part of the office hour. So I have a question about the MS3 or the general MS topic area. Are you still interested in the proposal on the integral benchmark evaluations project? For example, for the project for the IRPH-EP handbook. In the previous years, we used to have a integral benchmark evaluations work scope, but this year is gone. So do you think a proposal will for MS3 will be appropriate?
Drew, do you know if we have that in a different scope area this year?
We don't have that specified in any of the scope areas. The nuclear data benchmark type work. So
let me answer it this way then. I don't know if you heard my general kind of description of what should go under topic area 4 versus something else. But this kind of fits in there. If what you're proposing has to do with model development, modeling capability development, it should go under topic area 4. If what you're proposing has to do with experimental data to support, a specific reactor type, it probably belongs there. Maybe the kind of benchmark that you're discussing, maybe that seems like it's in a no man's land in between those two things, and maybe it is, which is why it's never really had a good home. But I think that is important work still. I think it is NE's intention to accept proposals on those things. So I would say look at the other reactor or fuel specific scopes. If it doesn't fit there, stick it under MNS3. I don't want to speak out of turn, but I can't believe that we wouldn't consider it here. It has a modeling and simulation use case that I think you could justify there. The one thing I would say is, please, what I've said in past years, you can go back and look at the language in those calls. Please highlight the how have I said it in the past? It would be good to bolster your application with some kind of indication of the impact that that benchmark would make, right? We get proposals sometimes on things that would be interesting to the researcher, but there's really no there's no real good quantification or even qualification of the impact that doing this benchmark would make, right? There's a lot of benchmarks out there at IRPHE and elsewhere. And so if you're going to propose something under there, I would really encourage you to really get specific and detailed on the impact that that is going to make. And to the extent that you can fold in statements from an industry party or some other designer, if it's not industry, as to why this particular proposed benchmark is going to be impactful for, again, getting back to what Drew mentioned at the beginning, like we set the requirements at the nuclear energy office top level. So how is it going to impact deployment of new reactors or continued operation of existing reactors? I think you've got to speak to that in what you put together.
Yeah, that sounds good. We may be able to make connections with the validation and also any quantification of the model simulation tools. Yeah. So I
think that's a good point. That could also be valid.
Yeah. I have a follow-up question about this project, which is if we submit a proposal to MS3, the previous integral benchmark evaluation projects, they are typically below $500,000 or even like 400K. And MS3 is up to 3 years and 1 million. So my question is, if we propose above, we request above $500,000, will that undermine the project, or should we stay within the budget of the previous years?
So the way we answered this earlier, Drew gave most of the answer, and I added a little bit. So I'll say it here. There's no penalty to proposing something less than that. In fact, if the work that you're proposing should be $300,000 and 2 years, or $600,000 and a year and a half, that's what you should put in. There's no requirement or incentive to stick it at the maximum. The work that you propose, cost it out and put the schedule together, and that should be what you propose and defend.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you very much.
And I will mention, just to add to Dave's comment, that as a reminder, there are these strategic needs areas which have kind of replaced, for all intents and purposes, what you could have considered the old mission supporting areas, right? So they're very general: nuclear chemistry, reactor physics, heat transfer, thermal hydraulics. So from that perspective, an argument can be made in that space as well, likely. So for some of those that may not have a good fit in some of these topic areas that we're discussing today.
Yeah, so do you mean the blue sky ones, right?
That's right.
So you think they might want the more research focused instead of benchmark projects?
Yeah, it's a fair argument. Yeah. So
yeah. Right. Thank you very much for the comments.
All right, we'll continue taking questions here for the next few minutes. If we'll kind of do a last call here, because we're down to 7 or 8 minutes here.
The lightning round.
All right, I have I have Ha Wong Bu. Go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Drew. So I have a question regarding MS2. In the language of MS2, say that proposals should address the issue of establishing incentive for safety parameters of interest for given technology within framework of regulatory licensing. So the last sentence in the language. With a given technology here, are we focusing more on like advanced reactor, non-laboratory advanced reactor, or SMR, or the existing fleet? And can you give some example of the safety parameters of interest here?
Oh man. So the first part is easier. No, I mean, we're not specifying one reactor type or another. Yeah, the proposal should just be, tailored to one or another. I will look and see if I can find some of the safety parameters that we had kind of identified when we put a draft scope together. Let me take a look. If I can't find it before we get off of this call, I'll send it out through Drew.
Okay, great, thank you.
And from our standpoint for that, if we don't get that answer, if Dave can't find it now, if you wouldn't mind sending an email as a reminder, that will help us kind of facilitate that exchange. So, so if you wouldn't mind sending an email to NEUP@inl.gov as a reminder, that would be really helpful.
Cool, thank you.
All right, last call for questions for anybody else.
And I don't mind staying on till the hour, so I'm looking for, just in case I can find the info and answer that question here.
Okay. Will, I don't see any hands raised here, so we will start to wrap up here as Dave looks for that. And I want to thank Dave for being here and for taking the lightning round of questions. We couldn't do this without awesome program managers, so thank you, Dave. From a going forward standpoint, just want to remind everybody that we do have our pre-application due date on October 11th coming up in the next few weeks. If you do have additional follow-on questions, we would encourage you to submit those as soon as possible through NEUP@inl.gov. That way we can work with program management and get a timely response for you to actually incorporate any feedback that you're looking for into your pre-application before you submit it. I do see hand raised. Go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, Drew, I have another question actually regarding probably more like a generic question. So about cost sharing. So I know that cost sharing is not the requirement there, but if we have cost sharing, can we count, like the hours of, for example, the industry partners, or the cost sharing only include the cash contributions?
Yeah, so you can, there's a 2-page guidance document in the funding opportunity that I encourage you to read. There are a variety of different types of cost sharing opportunities that you can identify. Those include in-kind cost, equipment or cash type cost sharing. So please read through that. And if you have any specific questions about the specific situation you're thinking of, you're welcome to email those to us, and we can work with the DOE Idaho tract representatives to get a clear answer about what's considered appropriate cost share and how you would communicate that in a budget, for example, or something like that. So
cool. Thank you. And okay. I think I'll follow up with the questions then.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, you're welcome to give the NEUP office here a call,
sure,
and we can walk you through some of those administrative things. So
yeah, great. Thank you.
All right.
All right. And let me respond to your previous question just a little bit. I was looking back at what we had written before in prep. And I think basically the first order answer is that the safety parameters of interest are going to depend on the reactor type and the particular component, right? If we're talking about fuel, maybe it's critical heat flux or something like that. If we're talking about sodium fast reactor, it's going to be very different than the important safety parameters for a light water reactor. So just the first order, I would say, keep that in mind. Making sure you're identifying, what the safety parameters of interest should be for that reactor type, and then lay out, how what you're proposing would be tackling that. That's probably the best answer I could give. I can get somebody to list out some more safety parameters of interest for a particular reactor type if that was needed, but I think it's best to have that onus on the applicant, quite frankly.
Sure. Yeah, thank you.
All right, that concludes our hour here. I would like to mention, thanks everyone for attending. If we're continuing to do these types of engagements to hopefully connect you with program management and the programs. This is going to be an ongoing effort. So if you found this session useful and high value, we'd like to know about that. If there's things that we as a university program could do, or suggestions you have to increase engagement from your perspective, please do let us know what those are, and we'll continue getting better at this. So thanks everyone for being here. Dave, once again, thank you for taking the questions, and I'm sure we'll be in touch as people get their pre-applications in. So take care, everyone.
Yep, happy to do it. Thanks for participating.
Thank you, Drew. Thank you, David.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Yep, take care.
Thank you, Drew. Thank you.